going?
I'm good. I'm sad I missed you running through my city yesterday.
I know. I was hoping that you would have been able to come by, but I'll keep coming back. You know that. I consider Atlanta to be one of my homes.
We would love for you to feel at home each and every time you pull up in the ATL. How are you this morning?
I am very well. All is good.
Absolutely. Let's talk about your visit. An epic situation for you to pull up over at Georgia International Convention Center, sit down with the brothers and have this wonderful conversation about Black entrepreneurship and leadership as we look forward to 2025 and further. What do you see as the two biggest things that need to happen?
Well, first, listen, here's my theory of it all, is that every person in America should have an ability to build wealth, including by starting or growing a small business or owning a home, and certainly the ability to pass on intergenerational wealth. Mm-hmm. And so what my tour is about is making sure that the policies that we are putting and passing, people know about it so they can achieve true financial security, right? And very clear, this is not only about the ability to pay your bills. It's about the ability to drive the kind of car you want to drive, to take the kind of vacation you want to take, to buy your children the kind of Christmas gifts that you want them to have, right? Mm-hmm. And so the work that I've been doing is about what we want to do to create access to capital, what we want to do to help people grow their ability for home ownership, mm-hmm. and what we want to do to also increase access to things like government contracts. And so, because here's the thing, our community does not lack for ideas or ambitions, right, but barriers exist. And so we're dealing with the disparities in access to capital and lending, the disparities in home ownership. Historically, we know, and Atlanta knows, from redlining and segregation to restrictive covenants, right? Disparities in terms of who gets government contracts. The president and I pledged from the first day we came in office that we would increase by 50% the number of federal contracts go to minority-owned businesses, and we're on track to do that. We're also dealing with removing barriers. So, for example, the SBA, the Small Business Association, mm-hmm. used to make people who were formerly incarcerated ineligible, which means they could not apply for small business loans. We've got rid of that. Nice. So that we have now put in place the rule that formerly incarcerated people are eligible for small business loans. We're dealing with the racial disparities in home appraisals, knowing that too many Black families, when they've been trying to get their home appraised, they know it's being appraised for less than the value. You've heard the stories about how they'll then have a friend who is a white family come in, put up their family photograph, right, and it gets appraised for much higher. So we're dealing with racial disparity in home appraisal. We're creating tax credits for new first-time home buyers. The president talked about it in the State of the Union. And then the work that I'm doing specifically that's about creating economic opportunity by putting more dollars into the community banks, which lend directly to folks in the community.
I was completely surprised to find out that home ownership dropped to a historic low for Black Americans in 2023. Now, I feel like I've been paying attention, but that came as sort of a surprise.
Well, when we look at what we need to address, first of all, home ownership, what does it mean in terms of intergenerational wealth? When you're able to own a home, that's when if your children say, I want to go to college, I want to go to, whether it be Morehouse, Spelman, or Howard, you as a parent can say, you know what, honey, you don't need to take out a student loan and get that debt. Right. We'll take some equity out of the house and help pay your tuition. Or if your child says, I want to start a small business, you can take some equity out of the house to give them, and that's why we are focused on that. We're also focusing on the barrier situation, which for so many communities is about far too much debt, right? Mm-hmm. Knowing that far too many people are burdened by that debt to the point that they can't buy a home because they're trying to pay off that student loan. We've now forgiven over $150 billion of student loan debt for over 4 million people, with double the amount going to people who are in public service like nurses and teachers and firefighters. We're dealing with medical debt. Mm-hmm. Now, Big Ticker, we're looking at, medical debt. A lot of people fall into medical debt because they have a medical emergency, so they weren't planning for it. Mm-hmm. And then they have to pay all that money and carry that debt for years and years and years. So here's what we've done on that. We've said the credit score cannot include medical debt.
Nice.
So medical debt cannot be included in your credit score. The other thing we said is that when you're applying for credit, your medical debt cannot be used against you when you're applying for credit, whether it be a credit card or trying to get a car loan. These are the things that become barriers if we don't address them to everybody, including folks in the community, being able to build up their economic strength and to build up their vision for themselves and their family.
The state of Mississippi, for example, declared April Confederate Heritage Month, but at the same time are trying to do away with critical race theory teaching and DEI. Well, how do you feel about that?
Listen, let me just say something. I actually, when I was in Atlanta yesterday, I was over at Rice, the Russell Innovation Center for Entrepreneurs, and then at the Convention Center, like you said. There is a full-on attack against what we know is critically important to acknowledge, which is the need for paying attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there are people who are full on trying to attack it, the same way they weaponize the word woke, right? And we can't let that happen. Look, equity. For example, let's look at the issue of what we've been discussing since the basketball games and March Madness, right? About how the women players don't get nearly as much as the men players. That's an equity issue. That's an issue that affects a whole lot of people.
Right.
Diversity. Let's pay attention to the fact that we have to have an acknowledgement that everybody should have access to the room and be in the room, right? When we talk about inclusion, looking at who has the ability to be in the room and make the decisions. And so, listen, I think we all have to stand and say that diversity is good for our economy. So much of what we're talking about is about economic power.
Right.
Diversity is good for our economy. Being inclusive is good for our economy. And we got to fight against these attacks.
Indeed. Vice President Kamala Harris with the Big Ticket Morning Show. You went viral yesterday for something you didn't even do. Sitting down with Drew Barrymore. She said she wanted you to be Kamala for the country.
Oh, did that go viral?
oh, yes.
Really?
Does Vice President Harris have, would she like to be Kamala for the country?
Well, I am Kamala to the children in my family, I'll tell you that.
Absolutely.
And that's what Cole and Ella call me.
Right.
And, listen, I think we all have a responsibility to understand the importance of caring for each other, right? And approaching the world and our communities and society with that kind of approach. I think it's something that's lacking these days. And, everybody's out for themselves and on their own. And I think the more of us that can agree that we're all in this together, I think the better off we'll be as a country.
Amen, amen. Vice President Harris, I appreciate your time and all the hard work you do, not only for the great constituents down here in Georgia, but all across our wonderful country. Thank you for your time. Continue doing what you're doing. We're 190 days or so away from the election. Please leave everyone with a note about how important it is to have their voice be heard.
You must vote. Your vote is your voice. Your voice is your vote. Let's not let anybody silence us. There's too much at stake. And also, Big Tigger, I want to also give you a website on the economic opportunity piece.
Absolutely.
Because I want to make sure your listeners know where to get that information. And go to whitehouse.gov, and then it's /economic opportunity. But it's whitehouse.gov, and then put in economic opportunity. I want your listeners who want to start a small business, who have a small business, know where they can go to take advantage of the loans that are being made available, where they can go to apply for the tax credits that we're talking about, where they can go to find information about whether they are eligible for loan forgiveness. Let's make sure everyone takes full advantage of what's being offered. That's part of why I'm doing this tour, because I feel I got to be in the streets and let folks know what we have done and not wait for people to have to knock on our door to find out.
Amen. They got to put them up on game, VP.
There you go. There you go.
Well, I appreciate your time and your commitment as well. Thank you again.
It's good to talk to you. You take care. I'll talk to you again soon, I hope.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
V103.